We'll call a meeting to order. And firstly, I have an apology from Pat and Malcolm. I'll move those if someone, second by Councillor Burdett. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, any declarations of interest? Right, we'll have confirmation of the non-confidential minutes if someone would like to move those. Moved by Councillor Burdett, second by Councillor Foster. And any matters arising? Including the action sheet. Right.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask anyone who's right up to speed of the Aorangi.
So through the Chair, the updates on the Orangiwai Bridge. So we met with the affected forestry company yesterday to discuss through the options that we have with them. So that was the second meeting that we've had in as many weeks with them to talk it through. We have a proposal for how we will put interim access in over that river at the moment. So sorry for those committee members not aware, it's a bridge that has failed effectively. The deck's there, but it's limited to 3 tonnes. There's a whole lot of forestry operating on the other side of it. We've worked through a proposal for a forward crossing and we're just finalising the access ways through, but we've been working very closely with the forestry company who has got a large amount of logs sitting on the ground on the other side that they need to get out. So we're very aware of the time pressures and working with them to get a good option through that.
It has occurred in New Zealand over the last week or so, and you know, we just have to remember those people who have suffered through that. So possibly a moment's silence. Thank you very much. Okay, any public, there's no public deputations. Extraordinary business. Anybody want to raise any extraordinary business? Thank you. Yeah, okay. Right. No notice of motion, no adjourned business. So we'll carry on with page 13. Which is the Waipawa Water Treatment Plant.
There's one question relating to this, and it's with option 3, approves reallocation of water metering renewals budget. How many water meter renewals is there? Is there many to be done?
Through the Chair, the meters that we're talking about are the industrial size ones, so they come in at like $30,000 to $40,000 bracket, so they're not little domestic meters or any of that. So most of our commercials are metered, so it's a replacement program, just an ongoing program of replacement.
So it's an ongoing program, it's not an urgent, there's none urgently need repairing or
low risk. I'll just take it as read if that's fine with the Chair.
No, I'm happy to move it because it's quite self-explanatory, so I'm happy to move it. It makes sense, it's common sense.
Is this the water meters that are coming
No.
in the future?
They just asked. It's a commercial ones.
I get
Yellow card. Good.
He's 10 rooms, one company.
You're out of here.
Any other questions? So we're going to move on to Councillor Stott and a second, Councillor Burdett. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
Just through the chair, just advise that the UV units actually arrived in New Zealand yesterday, so we're on track to have complete that project. Europe somewhere, Germany, I think.
So we'll move on to page.
So through the chair, this aggregate supply panel was put together in response to issues that we were having ongoing in roading, in particular when it came to winter and actually getting enough aggregate to put onto our roads. We all start competing with each other at the same time of year, and there was very limited supplies that we as Tairāwhiti Roads had direct access to. So we've gone through the first expression of interest, and we've got the parties there that you can see in the report, and they are spread right throughout the district. The purpose of this is for this year and next year, making sure that we've got enough supply coming in to help feed the increased work program that we have. If more suppliers come out, we're always more than happy to talk to people as they come through. The key thing for us in this is we've already placed some huge orders already, and we've been placing them in December and January to make sure that we have stuff when we actually start getting through to April and May to be able to putting our mecking program on. So the good part about how we've done this is, as you can tell by the report, we've identified a range of suppliers that had never supplied us before or hadn't even thought about supplying us. So they've actually come out. They've also, the contractors who are in here, we know have also bought more gear to be able to keep up, because we've been able to talk about the volumes that we have coming through. One of the key things we have going forward is around that chain of custody for making sure that when we do crush metal, that what we crush ends up on the road and we don't lose metal in between the order being placed and what goes on the road. And we're working through that with our contractors and with the suppliers that we've identified in the report. So this is a big step forward for us as council, because it means that we're taking control over who's supplying us. This will create far bigger efficiencies in not just cartage and transport, but also around the being able to put just-in-time delivery down and having material that we're no longer trucking for literally hundreds of kilometres. We have access to quarries where we need them. The OPIS report's been really good because it's also given us how we're going to blend the material to make the pavements in those areas as well. So this is really positive, and the Tairāwhiti Roads team have done a fantastic job getting it to this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I applaud David for getting this together. It seems such a logical thing to do. You wonder why it hasn't been done before, but you know, that's how often councils work. But at least we've got somebody thinking a bit outside the square. And as he mentioned, in the past, there has been a lot of long cartage, getting metal from one place to another instead of using the local materials and maybe designing the work a little bit differently. And look, this is going to make things work much more efficiently. It's just an absolutely logical thing to do. I mean, even the contractors are saying, well, why don't you do this? And so here we are. We're actually using our common sense here. And I can see that this is going to work really well. So thanks very much for that.
So through the chair, one of the things we're working with our environmental science team here at council is actually trying to better understand what our material supply looks like now, but also well into the future. So through this process, we've identified a number of new potential quarries as well, where landowners have come and said they have the geotech and there is viable amounts in the ground to come out. I think the councillors in the community are aware Taufari Farms, for example, has quarrying suitable land up there, and we're just trying to work out amounts and those things there. It will be an issue in the future. Some quarries have got 100 years left on them at the rates they are now. Some of them are going to be closed in 2-3 years. Some of them it's actually not cost effective to take out of unless big amounts come out. So, for example, Parutahi Quarry, which I know Neville knows better than I'll ever know, having been the one who took most of the material out of it. There's a massive amount of overburden that needs to come out of that quarry before it gets back to a usable phase. However, given the volumes we're taking, it's actually become viable again. So it is very much a mix, but it's something we'll be presenting back to council is around that future use of material and where it is and where the life of it is, because it is still a finite resource.
The competitive nature of the resource requirement. I mean, forestry does absorb a huge amount of metal, and a number of those contractors work directly to forestry. How long-term is have we got them locked into supply council?
So through the chair, some of the resources are river run, which they're, so that's where we take it out of a riverbed. So the Waipu, for example, I know you know well, Bill, it's got a fair amount of gravel in there to come out. So some of those we can compete with each other. Other ones we have, you all know the perverse scenario that we had with one of our own council quarries that we didn't have access to, but the forestry company had a lease on and we couldn't get our own material out of it. So this has reversed a lot of those things. Last year, as I said, in winter, no one could keep up with production with what forestry and council were taking at the same time, hence why we've done this process to give ourselves surety of that material. So I think there's always going to be tension between forestry and ourselves and our contractors, hence why we're buying well ahead of schedule so that it can be run before everybody else starts ordering as well.
Just a one. I'll see it on the page 33. The quality assessment of the rock coming out of the quarries. Will there be compromise with distances to quality that you'll be getting at times? I mean, if you've got a higher quality rock in a certain place, it's a further distance to a lesser quality. Would there be a compromise to the quality? Or would you be going for the highest quality at all times?
So through the chair, one of the things we're working through with Opus and in particular some people who have been around this district for a very long time is what blends of road work, what blends of rock work when creating a pavement surface. So a lot of this came about last winter when we were driving through forestry roads, looking at the condition of them as opposed to ours. And there are different mixes of rock that can be suitable depending on where it is and what the use of that road is. So always we want to make sure that our roads are fit for purpose for our community and they're going to last. However, some of the lessons learned from talking to very experienced contractors who have been around for a while is actually how we make that sub-base up. And a lot of the time we were trucking material 130 k's to put down the right rock when there was actually a similar substance nearby. So for base course, we can potentially look at changing options. And we're going to be working through different blends over the next couple of years in different areas to make sure that we get that right. And it does come down to the size of rock and then looking at what sort of blends, what fines, and those things are inside of it to make sure we get the right pavement surfaces. But I've driven some forestry roads that have been done with rotten rock and they hold up absolutely fine in winter, which you would not expect them to do, depending on how they're constructed. So it is working through the different blends, and that's something that we're making sure our engineers are absolutely across and signing off to make sure that we're putting the right roads in. So this is part of that discussion that we had around making sure we have the right local roads in the right place, that we're not over-engineering or under-engineering what it is that we're putting in. So through the chair, the activity managers are all present. So if you want to work through section by section, if there's questions that you want to ask or clarification on anything that's there as part of the report, more than happy to go section by section or to take the report as read and the teams are here to answer questions. It's up to you. One of the things to remember is the financials are only as far as to January, so it doesn't include the big spends that we have had in February and in particular in this month where we have got some really big work programs. At the end of each of the water sections, you can see the construction timeframes that we have there, which are updated to show you when the design is going to happen, when we're in tender, and then when we're in construction phase. And as you can see, very little is actually going past that 30 June deadline at this stage. There will be some projects that we'll have to carry forward, but we can talk to those as you get to the sections if you like.
Yeah, I just want to comment, I mean, the format of these reports are fantastic. I mentioned this morning, you know, it's just makes it so much easier to be able to look at the different, you know, options that are happening and the progress, you know, so, and to be able to, you know, formulate different questions about the different topics is so much easier in this format. You know, I really commend staff for it. I do have a question on page 70 to do with Wairoa. I see there was a meeting last month. Oh. Oh, okay.
When are we actually going to get into that project, Monipoto? I've seen that, but they want to know when there's going to be a start.
So we're working through that at the moment. So we've got the Hawke's Bay Regional Council modelling that's been done previously for sizing the flume, and we're now talking to suppliers of U-shaped flumes to get a pricing to see whether we can do one flume or both flumes this financial year.
So we have a community meeting there next week. We could tell them it's going to happen shortly.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? And just as a point of interest, how are we going? How's the start of this Waipawa flood bank looking? Is it like, obviously, it's, you happy with the way it's all proceeding?
That might be something that Neville can answer. I haven't been involved in the day-to-day or weekly operations of the capital projects. That's Neville. I don't know whether Neville can answer that.
Through the chair, the progress is actually very good. The contractor has made significant progress. He's actually engaged additional scrapers onto the site. They're meeting the compaction requirements set out quite comfortably, and I would suggest it's probably at some stage it would be worthwhile a site visit to actually see. They are actually in sections up to the design height and have trimmed off the profiles now, and it looks very impressive.
Thank you. Okay. If there's no other comments or questions with regard to rivers and drainage, what's the next one on the list, Dave? Landfill, is it? Waste management. Page 70. Right. 67. Yeah. So back to you, Larry.
I've got a couple of questions to ask about this. On page 70, just working with Wairoa, with engaging in a new collection services contractor discussion in February. We'll provide an update on where opportunities may exist in the future. Has that meeting happened, and what opportunities came out of it?
Through the chair, we haven't had that meeting as yet. What it hinged on was a meeting that we were having with Waipu, so the Waipu Advisory Group meeting, whether there was opportunities there. Once we've finished that meeting, then we will get back to them about any options that they're looking at to work with us around where waste goes there, or yeah, just some collaboration work around that.
Too, and it's about the illegal dumping. I see on the next page there's going to be an increase this year of illegal dumping, which is really unfortunate. 22 tonnes tracking at the moment for the year. My question is there any particular type of illegal dumping that's happening, any particular sort of waste, and is there a particular area where it's more predominant?
Through the chair, no, it's just quite consistent. There's a lot of areas that we end up picking a lot of illegal dumping up from. Centennial Marine Drive, Waimata, there's definitely areas there. Yeah.
If there are areas that are, obviously down the Centennial Drive, that's always been an area there, but with the bollards down there, we kind of thought it might detract a bit, but that obviously is not stopping anybody.
Through the chair, the bollards have stopped entry into the sand dunes, but unfortunately it's pushed them further down towards the river mouth, and yeah, we're ending up collecting from further down. So, yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, just a couple of things from me on that page 72. Those in the second box down, reduction in waste to landfill, that's what we're aiming at. But in the commentary it says we're tracking on some of the figures of the previous years. But then you have a look underneath it, it says the ratio of recycling to waste, figures currently at 35.65, which indicates a reduction in waste and an increase in recycling. So what is it? Is it actually a reduction in waste when we're tracking similar figures to last year? Or am I just catching you?
There's been a change, but it's a bit hard to say whether that's going to be continue. So just based on the figures that we had when we put this report together for that period, it did show that there was a change in the ratios, but we're not sure. We think it could be similar to last year's.
Yeah, so you've got to sort that out. You're not quite sure whether, because they conflict, those two statements anyhow. Okay, look, the other thing was back on page 70, implement a waste management and asset replacement program. So saying that a program has been developed, I just wondered for education of me and council, what assets are included in that?
Through the chair, assets are our landfill pumps, our transfer stations, those assets, our litter bins, pits, pumps, yeah.
So basically everything to do with waste.
Collections, yeah.
Okay.
Can I see here we're going to struggle, and it looks like it's not going to go away, to get rid of some of our rubbish, and especially now that China has become more, maybe fussy is the word, of what they're taking, or more selective of what they're taking. And it says we await new opportunity. And I wonder if we actually, are we actually looking for opportunity outside someone to take it from us, or because, and I raise this because Councillor Burdett Wilson and I were here at a time when we closed Pokahu down and we were needing to find new alternative methods, and a couple of options came up, and then Manders Road came up. But through that discussion, we had companies come to us offering to investigate establishing cogeneration plants which would burn our civic waste. Now, at that time, there was a little bit of pushback against it through the possibility of resource consents and that, but they've become a lot more sophisticated, a lot cleaner, and a lot more accepted worldwide now. And I'm wondering, is it an occasion where we could actually go and look for opportunity rather than wait for one to come to us? And are those the sorts of things we should be having a look at again?
Through the chair, there have been people or companies that have inquired about doing that just recently, and we definitely open to what they're proposing, or as well as what's happening in the ministry. So any opportunities that come out of what's been driven by the Ministry of the Environment. So yeah, we'd like to see what they've got to offer and what it is that they're talking about doing.
So as a supplementary question or comment, do you think it would be worth us actually putting this on the table as an option and actually pursuing it as because we are going to get into trouble, and I think, and again, it probably needs to be worked at a national level as well, and because of standards and other requirements for legislation, and so maybe is it probably something that would be worth putting on the table again and saying, hey, we as a committee ask our staff to follow this up and see how we go with that. Would that be a worthwhile option? Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, I can probably help a bit with this discussion. So there are a number of conversations going on around the country, and we are quite, we're reasonably advanced in some of the conversations. So there's work being done in Tairāwhiti around compostables, and you'll recall from the waste minimisation plan that compostables are a huge opportunity for us in terms of reducing the waste to landfill. I think we could deal with all the organic waste that's being put out in the curbside collection, we'd probably reduce the curbside collection component that goes to landfill by between 20 and 30% in waste. So there's a big opportunity there, and that's something that we need to act on through the waste minimisation plan. There's also an organisation that has applied to the Provincial Growth Fund for a feasibility study around waste energy plants, and I've provided a letter of support to support their application for that feasibility study. There's also discussion on the table at the moment around biochar, treatment of wood waste, and there's also the start of a discussion around local management of waste plastic to turn it into materials that can be used locally. So there's no silver bullet at the moment. What's happened in Southeast Asia and China around accepting our rubbish has actually happened quite rapidly. The nation as a whole is grappling with it. We're faced with the 3 to 7 category plastics going to landfill rather than being recycled or assumed to be recycled. But that accounts for 6%, I think, of our waste stream. So on the scale of things, dealing with green waste is actually going to have a much bigger effect on our waste stream than finding solutions to that 6% of plastic that is going to be going to landfill this year.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion around waste?
Third paragraph down, environment and community engagement has been initiated by working with community around waste. Anyway, that long story short, the last community meeting, both Andrew and Dwayne got heaps about the white land by council. There was a comprehensive report initiated and delivered to the community group, advisory group. A number of dates were floated for a meeting with them. Eventually a date was settled on the morning of the particular meeting. They all bailed out and left Dwayne to do duty work and through the snow. I just think council has done very well to progress things with the white out. There's no non-compliant issues, and we need to acknowledge Dwayne for what the work he's done. That's my view anyway. So, as I said, these ones, these very, very capable people, enthusiastic people bailed out the morning of the meeting.
Thank you for that. Right, if there's no other questions with regard to waste, we move on to Irafiti Roads. Just as, welcome, Helen. Is there anything you'd like to just run through before we get started here? No. Yeah, okay. Councillor Foster.
Just a couple here. To start with, on page 80, it mentions quite a few times with any repair work that needs to be done at the moment that there's already 400 sites that require designs and consents before these can be procured to market. How long do we think the 400 sites are going to take to get done before we look at the other stuff? And are they all similar in size, or?
So through the chair, one of the biggest issues we're grappling with is not just consenting, but it's the actual design and engineering for the sites that are failing where they are. A lot of the fails that are there at the moment that require consents or engineering are big dropouts. So they're dropouts where the road is literally falling down a hill and we're trying to stabilise a hill so that we can put a road back through it. There's also things where we've been working over or around water, where we're going to need consent for the type of work that we do, just like anybody who does the consents in that space. So it is something that we're working through as quickly as possible, but we have got other works that the contractors are on instead while we wait for those. And as the consents and designs come through, we just feed that into the work program as they come online.
Yeah, the other question too is there's one here, NCTA asks staff to revise business cases before funding can be released. there seems to be quite a bit of a problem, or maybe we won't call it a problem, but a hiccup when it comes to communication with the PGF funding, getting the funding through. And it's obviously causing a bit of grief when you're getting asked to revise business cases.
So through the chair, the provincial growth funding, I'm going to jinx myself, but we are nearly there with releasing of the contract and signing of a contract there. So we're very close to having that come through. The business cases are an NZTA requirement for any funding that comes from the New Zealand Transport Agency. And a business case is around what are we trying to do on that road? What's the improvement and what's the benefits that are going to be realised from doing that? It's par for the course for us when it comes to unlocking funds from NZTA, and we have staff that know how to navigate that process and make sure that we have an appropriate response. So it is just something that's part of getting funding from NZTA. It's just part of the process.
Right. So when it says revised, it doesn't mean that you've already done it and you have to do it again.
So for some of them, it's around making sure we have the right level of detail. So when we made the application for the provincial growth funding, a range of projects were identified as part of that application. It's taking those projects into a further amount of detail so that funding can be released to do the physical works. So for example, if we say we were going to repair Gladstone Road, in order to unlock NZTA funding, we'd have to say how we're going to repair Gladstone, what's wrong with it, how we're going to repair with it, and what are going to be the benefits going forward for the community. So it's around articulating what the actual fix is, or what's the problem and what's the fix that goes with it, further than just identifying it.
It's on page 80, and it's complete investigation to consider the best heavy vehicle routes. Is this part of the Cardno report, or is this a separate report?
So through the chair, this is the Cardno report that's been run by the strategic planning team. It's something that's funded through the provincial growth funding that we have.
Right, any other discussion?
Maintenance of bridges. Surely that's not a company right, given the amount of work maintenance needs to be done on bridges.
So through the chair, that maintenance of bridges, the $820,000 that's there, that's the additional funding to go through the work to understand the assets better and actually get the list and the priorities ready and some of the design work for those. So that's on top of the funding that we have within this LTP. This is making sure we've got the designs. The number's not higher because we're not at the physical work stage for most of those bridges yet.
Yeah, that's for clarification. That's just for maintenance figure. It's not capital upgrades or anything. So yes, it's ongoing maintenance.
It's just PG.
Yep. Okay.
I've got one other one actually.
Councillor Foster. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Right. On page 81. Now we're talking about Tarahuru Cycleway external funding. And the project team are focused on completing the Wainui Stage 1 Gladstone Bridge. An options paper is required about the future of Rootney Road. Now, later on down the track, we see there's been delays for drainage for Rootney Road. So, obviously, that's going to be a delay in the cycleway program for Rootney Road. Now, my question is and there's obviously question marks from different community groups already that are questioning the viability and maybe not that happy with the original plans that were put out with the Rootney Road extension. Is there a possibility that Wainui Road would be possibly re-looked at as an option and Crawford Road, or as a cycle entry, or are we hell-bent on pursuing the Rootney Road option?
I'd just like to answer that. I don't think there's any hell-bent about it, but it's been a decision made of council at this stage that Rootney Road would be our priority, and to use that sort of language I think is incorrect. It's just a decision that we've made, and if you want, I'll rip another yellow card off. And so I think if that's a matter you want to raise, then raise it in a proper, like if you want to re-raise it again, there are channels for that. Otherwise, our staff are committed to actually following our instructions.
Put our staff on the spot, but I just see notice on down the track that the drainage has been delayed, so it's going to delay this whole program. As we know, everyone's kind of keen to get this all happening, and obviously it's not going to happen as rapidly as possible. So I thought there might have been a change of tact. But anyway.
So just
Apologies for any offence.
So just further through the chair, just to update the committee, as Councillor Foster said, the stormwater activity section shows we are having real issues when it comes to the Rutini stormwater upgrade. That does have implications for our timeframes to deliver on the Rutini Road cycleway. So we are bringing a paper back with options for council to consider, but as the chair has said, it was a council decision around putting that cycleway in. There's $1.5 million set aside for this financial year from NZTA and GDC to continue that cycleway. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that, so it's a pause moment for us to consider our options, and we'll be bringing those back to council.
Okay. Right. One last quick question. Your last questions? I'd ask, what's your level of confidence that the rural councillors will have an easier winter this year?
Yellow card, please.
That's a straightforward question.
So through the chair, Heather, I'm not sure if you have those Cool. So one of the things that we wanted to show you, and I'm showing you deliberately and not handing it to you, because I want to be able to change it.
You mean not be held against it?
Exactly. No, it's around the work program that we have coming up in Tairāwhiti Roads, and it is substantial. So we have a large amount of work that's been progressing in the background, which is really hard because we can't kind of show you anything tangible. So the likes of getting all of that aggregate supply and those things, you don't see the difference in the road yet. You don't see that actually going down. So one of the things we have, any one of them, and I'll just talk to them as they come through. So part of it is around showing you where our resource is going to go and the volume. So as you see in the PGF funding, there's an extra couple of $1 million going down in Metling for this year. We also have a very substantial pavement program that's underway at the moment as well. I know you can't build, that's why I made it so small.
Very tiny so we can see.
So that is our resource program. If you just want to scroll down here, that this is around the timeframes for the delivering things that are going to be there. So as you can see, it's got crews from out of town that are actually helping us deliver this. So this is just for the reseal component. We've got all of the available resource in Gisborne working on reseals on top of this as well. So this is the Hawke's Bay crew, there's a Tauranga crew and a New Plymouth crew that are working here as well. They're coming here and that's the resealing that's going on at the moment all across the district. So that's happening all over the place right now. You're going to click to another PDF if that's all right, Heather, and there's the local roads component for what we have planned when it comes to the Metling program has been started. So some of the works that are due on that as well. That there is the AC works that we've got in at the moment, and the AC is about, so asphalt program for this year. So down is asphalt plant is here, and we've got that started up and working underway, and that's about a $4.5 million program that will be run over the coming months as well. So the big ones that you'll see are the likes of Awapuni Road. So the work to enable that has already started, moving the stormwater underground, moving the manholes, getting things ready there, changing the stuff we needed to. Rakaitane, of course, is the other big one that's about to start off through there. The biggest one that people, I'm sure, will be happy to hear is Gladstone Road is on there as well. So that's the final part from Derby Street right down to Custom House Street. So that stretches in the run to be done as well. That will be happening at night. So a lot of that work will be outside when people will be there so that it's less disruption as possible to the community as we go through that. So that's just the kind of big ones that are sitting there. Alongside that AC run is a huge amount of work that needs to happen on patches as well. So there's a whole lot of patches. We know Ormond Road, Rutini Road, a lot of AC areas where we've got fails. They'll be done as small patch runs as well as part of this going through. So we have paving crews that will be coming, and I think it's 3 paving crews for 12 weeks minimum is what we've got at the moment coming through. Of course, it's all subject to weather. The last one, Heather, could you bring that one up? Because that's around, oh, is that renewals? What have we got this time? That's right. So the other one is all of the renewals that are happening across the district, and that's where roads like Tauwhare, Kanakanai, some of the ones that are right out in the middle of nowhere are being done, and those are underway at the moment. You just can't see that's where the crews are, but then there's also some of the stuff in the urban network that needs to happen at the same time as well. So we have a very big march already underway. That's the most work we've put through. So it's looking good. Weather's kind of playing its part, but not really. A lot of this is reliant on the weather, but we will be able to AC for longer, so do asphalt longer than we have because the plant's here, so the temperatures don't cool as much. So we should be able to run longer. So we're going to run as long until we run out of weather. So that's the plan for roading. So the purpose of those is it's not just us saying hot air, the program's there, the resources there, it's booked in and it's here and it's underway. So it's just to give you that reassurance.
So the answer is probably better chance than previous.
Oh, I would never say that because you won't be up afterwards. But it is going to take time to get through it all.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
First time we get a full fresh, we're in trouble.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, we'll trust in that they're doing the best they can at this stage. Right, okay. And it sounds like they are doing well. So we'll move on, if there's no more roading questions, to the urban stormwater on page 87, is that correct? And I think we have to sort of acknowledge that a lot of this issue also affects our wastewater because of infiltration. So the two actually sort of basically hand in hand, yeah. Well, at this stage, that's what we're trying to sort out. So, yeah. So anything you gentlemen would like to sort of talk about, or?
Okay.
You can.
I can talk briefly about the issue of stormwater getting to wastewater.
Yeah, that's fine.
So in terms of DrainWise program, we're going full speed ahead. We've got multiple work streams happening at once. We've got a compliance and enforcement policy being worked out to deal with those private property issues, where we get most of the inflow and infiltration. We've got an education and awareness program, something I'm calling more of a call to action sort of program to get people to understand the issue and to make changes. We have the public pipes on private property work, design work progressing really well. We are in a negotiation stage with landowners because if we're going to put new pipes on the property, we need the permission, and that is going well, although we're finding the negotiation stage very intensive. And we have a number of other focused projects we're doing, for example, identifying downpipes into gully traps and removing them. And the good news there is that we're well on the way to getting those downpipes out. So overall, we're hitting all the marks, and we are about to implement the first project.
Okay. Any questions, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, just over the DrainWise thing, and actually, just taking a step back on a higher level, a lot of the capital works that are down for our infrastructure are all relying on catching up the program in the last few months. And as is in the commentary here with DrainWise, well, if we get a bit of bad weather, well, some of the works are going to be challenged to be done. And I think, I can't remember, I haven't got the page in front of me, but I think DrainWise is well under its budget capital expenditure at the moment. So are you confident that you can still, even if we have a bit of adverse weather, that you will meet budget by the end of the year?
So in terms of the DrainWise budgets, there are a number of budgets associated with the work. Yeah. The budget you're referring to is the the public pipes and private property. Yeah. We've resourced up there to have more engineering expertise. And so we are at the moment looking at 15 separate projects that we try and get going. So there will be a hockey stick effect towards the end of the year, and we're still aiming to spend that budget. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Foster?
No, sorry, yeah.
No, Councillor Foster and Councillor Stoltz.
Yeah, last year we had 5 incidences of dispersing into the river through the scours. A hypothetical question, I guess, if we had the same amount of rainfall this year, do you think there would be an improvement from what work that's been done already on the amount of times they, the pressure that would be put on our scours?
So that's, we will have made progress on one of the key issues in the drain moss program. That's the inflow from downpipes into gully traps. Now, whether or not that will result in a decrease in the frequency of the overflows, I can't tell you for sure, but it may well, or it should make a difference to volumes that go out. So we may still have a number of overflows, but it could have a change to the volumes. The benefits of the drain moss program are not going to become evident in this year, as I said before. And I think last time I said we'd be patient. Just remind everyone of that.
So write that down, patience.
I do have one other question, but I'm hoping you have to. Okay, and it's just to do on page 89, and it's got growth-related upgrades in the Tarahira block development of a concept plan is required to align infrastructure budgets with actual development. So I'm reading between the lines here. Does this mean that the development is happening a bit faster than what you anticipated? So we're having growth upgrades to cater for it?
So through the chair, the Tarahira block is a complicated one when it comes to how it's going to be developed as to where our infrastructure goes. So the land has been zoned for residential properties and there's different parcels within that. So we've worked with a number of developers for a number of different iterations for how they might want to lay out their stormwater and out their roads as well. So part of it is working with the developers to find out what they want to put in and where they're going to put it in, and then how we can actually design that up. And I know I've only been through about 4 different versions of that. I'm sure Neville's been through about 14. So it is around just trying to find out what it is that the development is going to be, and that's part of that concept plan, is around trying to understand what that footprint will look like and then see what sort of pump stations are required and what piping upgrades are required by our teams.
Is there any sort of guideline or regulation around what developers can actually do? Like, oh, sorry, Councillor Snodgrass. Is there any, like, or are we just sort of moving every time a developer wants something to try and?
Through the chair, the overall standard is actually our engineering code of practice. But we have had an inject recently with regards to the freshwater plan and the implications around that. And Wolfgang has actually been working with our regulatory team to look at the stormwater drainage issues associated with it. But I think the overbearing issue that we face is actually having a lead developer. The blocks have, some of them been sold off, and we no longer have a lead developer, where Barry Moss did the driving of the large portion of the development out there. We no longer have a lead developer. And we're working with our district regulator to actually look at what could be a feasible option for a layout, and that's currently still being worked through. Basically, everybody's looking for somebody to provide the lead, and at this stage, council's under a lot of pressure from very localised developers wanting to do 5 to 10 lot subdivisions, and it's very difficult to plan a layout and provide the infrastructure when it comes in piecemeal form.
Councillor Stoltz.
I have one question. Maybe a year ago, we had a paper where we discussed how funding to fix up the Drainwise project would be allocated, and we were discussing if it is on a private property or it's in a public area, how we would balance that out, because some issues are caused, the issue appears on a public, on a private property, but it might be a design issue or it's complicated. It's not always that property that caused the issue. And I remember we had a relatively detailed paper. What's that? The white paper. So that is what I want to talk about. What happened to that? Because I cannot even remember what principles we applied to say this is the direction that we're heading in. And I do think we need to talk about that again. How are we going to fund this? How are we going to assist people who are facing bills that is a problem on their property, but they haven't caused it, or it's our design fault, or it's other properties? And I'm just concerned that we touched on it, it's probably a year ago and we haven't discussed it again. So I would love for us to just relook at that and rediscuss it to see how we're going to allocate this funding.
Did
Thank
we actually
you.
come up with a definite?
Through the chair, if you recall, the original paper that came through for funding was to do with the public drain on private property. If you recall, we allocated $5.4 million over 10 years out of a need requirement that we anticipated would fund something like 13.2. So we had identified the public benefit portion of those stormwater issues. What we're now looking at is the enforcement policy, which is due to come to you in somewhere in April, May, for your first view of an enforcement strategy, which will look at the funding issues around affordability. The Act currently has the fact that is working on that public-private benefit. So generally, because we are now dealing with all the issues on private property, in its current form, it is the private property owner will pay. The question is at what rate, and that's the discussion that we wish to have with you when we bring the report to you. The Local Government Act provides for the ability for council to do the work if they can't afford it and recover the costs. So again, that's another discussion as to how hard we push our implementation and how do we address the issue of affordability. But we have some strategies without giving us, there are WINS assistance, and a lot of the property owners are also rental people. So some won't be affected and others can apply for financial assistance. It's April or May that we've got a plan.
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Dunn.
Right, thanks very much. Page 97, we've got some measures there and, attendance time and got the result there and so on, but I'm a bit mystified with the commentary. Okay, annual measure, good. On target to achieve, good. But what does measure stop being evaluated? Reasons are being investigated. What does that actually mean?
Can I just note where you've moved on to wastewater, but that's fine. We're handling both together anyhow, so that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, so some of the measures have just literally been stopped being done, and we're not quite sure why they've been stopped. So there's an internal discussion with different department of council to work out why that measure's been stopped and when we can't be called against it.
Okay, well, yeah, I thought that's what the words meant, but I couldn't understand the logic behind that. But anyway, okay, obviously you're going to either keep the measure going or you'll come back with a reason why it's changed or something different.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Councillor Dunn. Yeah.
Councillor Stoltz and the white paper. Oh, did we arrive at any high level principles or strategic direction for how we were going to deal with what Neil was talking about for the white paper? I don't think we did. But
so through the chair, the committee had a discussion around the principle of user pays and where that applies and how that could be achieved. So the staff are working on if we were going to require people to pay, how could they pay? And the committee gave quite good feedback around, is there rates, options, what are the financing options, what are the outcomes that we're looking for and how could they be achieved? So one of the things we're working through, if you remember, we talked about bundling up of work, for example. So does council pre-buy a whole lot of fixes for the year and then charge them to the ratepayer through their rates, like the Warm Up Your Homes campaign and those things were. So the team are working through the different options to present back to you about how they could actually look like and how they complement or don't complement each other and how that could be rolled out and what's suitable for our community and the catchments and those things as they go forward.
Okay. Councillor Foster.
Just got one question on page 98. I'll just read through. It's on in one of the boxes. Deterioration rates of components at the wastewater treatment plant are greater than expected, especially on the industrial line. It is proposed to componentise treatment plant assets so renewal regime can be implemented. Can you explain to me what componentise means?
Yep. So one of the, you look at me like that. So through the chair, one of the issues we have with the wastewater treatment plant is how we depreciate that asset and how we manage it going forward. So some parts of it have a longer lifespan than others, and part of the work that Neville and his team have been doing is going through the assets and actually understand how they depreciate and how longer life they actually have in. The industrial line and some of the components for the wastewater treatment plant are wearing out faster than what it said it would on the box effectively. So what we're doing is breaking it down into more of a component by component phase for how we put the lifetime on some of those things. So for example, instead of saying the wastewater treatment plant, it's over 30 years, we'll depreciate it over that. In reality, it doesn't work that way. Pumps break down faster than that, particularly with the inputs we have going through. Grit screens, all of those things need to be done on a component by component basis, not just from what the manufacturer says, but from what our team is seeing on the ground as well. So Neville and his assets team are working with the wastewater treatment plant operators to make sure that we're depreciating those assets in the right speed so that we're renewing them before they fail.
Is there any chance of any comeback if someone has sold us equipment based on X amount of years of use and it's not actually performing to the X amount, that time frame?
We do keep an eye on warranties, but a lot of the equipment has quite short warranties. So, but we do, if a component fails, and we've had a few failures in the last few weeks, PLCs and uninterrupted power supplies breaking down. But yeah, the first thing we do check is whether or not it's still under warranty, given the life, how long it's been in use. Most of those warranties are expired now.
Okay. Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, just following on from Foster there. It says deterioration rates of components at the wastewater treatment plant, but the industrial line doesn't go to the wastewater treatment plant. It doesn't go through the plant. It doesn't go through the BTF. It joins up with our discharge out of the BTF. So it's not actually the treatment plant that's getting.
So through the chair, it's the grit screens. It still goes through those.
Do they not have limits on what they can put through in terms of suspended solids and?
Through the chair, it's around things like bearings wearing out faster. It's around the amount of sand that comes through our pipes. It's those kind of things that are wearing things out faster than what we first anticipated. So it's not industrial putting through a whole lot of heavy chemicals. It's just wear and tear on the plant, given the loads that we're putting through is what's happening. So it's that kind of thing. It's not necessarily a fault of the input. It's the machine is just wearing out faster than what we'd anticipated.
Any other questions? Right, we'll move on to, is it water supply? Any questions on the water supply?
So just to clarify for the committee as well, we will be bringing a report to the full committee around the water break and the lessons learned and those things from that one. So that'll come at a later date once we have that review finished. So at the moment, it's been led by Judith, who's our water team leader, having a look at what's gone on where, working with Fulton Hogan to understand faults and those kind of things.
Just a question on the water. I mean, it's not down in here, but what is our capacity, our dam capacity at this particular present point of time?
I don't have that number to hand. I mean, we've had plenty of rain, and the water storage in the reservoirs has been pretty good all summer. So there's generally no concerns at the moment.
Through the chair, it's fine. We're talking 70, 80% odd, somewhere around there. So the dams have got plenty of water in them for this time of year. But as always, this time of year, we'd urge water users to conserve. We've still got a long time before we get some heavy rain.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, look, just with the measures around measuring the success of our indicators, what's NA stand for? Well, why would you have that against all these measures And then in the commentary, it says compliance met to date. Well, okay, page 105, you know.
I did note that.
Compliance standards with the water. It's just that other areas, the results, you've got the actual results down there. And here it's not applicable. Well, hang on. Again, this is not making much sense. Not available. But it must be if you say it's compliance met to date.
Through the chair, I think something's gone wrong with the reporting for the performance here, because I know that we've met the performance measures of being compliant with all of our water. I wouldn't be sitting in this chair if we hadn't met that so far.
Exactly.
So we have met. It's an annual performance, but I know that we have met our 100% compliance for our drinking water standard.
That's why it's not applicable, because we're talking about quarters here. So you only report it at the end of the year. But, well, why couldn't we report it quarterly?
Through you, Chair, when it, in the other reports, when it's an annual report, annual measure, it's gone NA, and then instead of the compliance things, it's gone annual measure on the side. So it's quite clear that it will be reported in Q4.
So it'd be good to actually have a result against the quarters, because I mean, it gives comfort for our community, and it's such an essential part to actually get right. Yeah,
correct. And can I just? There was the two things that I sort of picked up, and I would have discussed in our chairs meeting, and that was one of them. And the other one was, as you said before, on target. No, we're going to achieve or something, but didn't say whether we were already tracking right or we were on target to achieve by catching up. You know, so it was just left that, and I made an assumption that it was a pro-rata year to thing, but yeah, it was just the wording was just appeared clumsy. So did you want to say something, Councillor Stolz? Any other comment? Yeah. So it's moved by Councillor Stolt and second by Councillor Foster. And no other comments or questions, so I'll put it all in favour. Against? Carried. Well done. And so that's basically the end of our formal. That's it. Did you have anything?
So through the chair, we have actually got a video of the Waipawa flood control scheme being built. If you do want to see it, it's only a very short clip of how they're actually doing it. So, and sorry, it's not the big tractor, but it's a decent sized one still.
So, the blue one.
No, not the blue one. We'll let you drive the blue one if you want, bro. So this is effectively how they do it. So they've taken it from the borrow pit and they're going back through. I think they're dumping this one up there, Neil. Dumping it. It's called a borrow pit. So that machine behind scrapes it up, and see how it's coming out as it goes past now. That's it, then putting it back down again. It'll go back around to the borrow pit, drop it down and just skim more off, reload back up that, and then just come straight back over the top again to keep building it up over and over and over again. One of the things we're finding is because the equipment is so large that we're using, we're actually getting really good compaction rates just from tractors going over the top of it because of the size of the tractor that you've all seen. So we're actually getting some quite good efficiencies when it comes to doing the compaction, because we're already getting close to compaction levels at some parts, because it just goes round and round on a loop. Every time it drives over, it's compacting as it goes backwards and forwards. So there's two tractors running. And they're moving a power of material very, very fast. So we're really proud of how the contractors are running at the moment. They're doing a really good job.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you all, folks, for your attendance and well done.